Can we still use these brown junction boxes? Or has the regulations quietly banned them without electricians realising it? Because if you search online, check your wholesaler, or look in the back of an electrician's van, you'll find them everywhere. The humble brown junction box has been a staple in UK electrical installations for decades. But if you talk to electricians now, you might hear the same claim. You can't use them anymore, they're banned, they're not compliant. But if that was true, why are manufacturers still making them? Why are some shops still selling them? And why do they still appear in electrical installations across the country? Well, in this video, we're going to get to the truth about the humble JB. Can you use them? Are they compliant? And can you stick them under a floorboard? So what does the wiring regulations actually say? Well, before we answer that, we need to find out what these junction boxes are actually designed to do, because not all these brown JBs are the same. The most common versions are 5 or 6 amps, 20 amps and 30 amp. The 5 or 6 amp versions are typically used on lighting circuits where the load is relatively small. The 20 amp and 30 amp versions are designed for higher current circuits such as radials or ring final connections. Inside, they're very simple. They contain screw terminals designed to join conductors together safely within an enclosure. No special technology, just mechanical screw terminals making an electrical connection. And they work for years. In fact, the junction box has been part of UK electrical installations for well over a century. Early junction boxes started appearing in the late 1800s when electrical lighting began to spread through buildings. They were often made from metal or even decorative cast fittings because electrical wiring was still a new technology and often installed on the surface of walls and ceilings. In the early part of the 20th century, a new material began to appear in electrical fittings: Bakelite. Bakelite was one of the first plastics used in electrical equipment because it was heat resistant, electrically insulating and extremely durable. It also happened to be naturally brown. So throughout the 1920s, 30s and 40s, many electrical accessories including junction boxes, switches and lamp holders appeared in that familiar dark brown colour. Later on, manufacturers moved towards moulded plastics and other materials, but the brown junction box had already become a familiar sight in installations. So why is it now when we see one we automatically cringe at what horrors might lie beneath? Well, all electricians will know that when it comes to any electrical accessory, the critical point we have to get right is the termination, because screw terminals can loosen over time. Copper conductors expand and contract with temperature changes, connections can relax, and if a connection does begin to loosen, the resistance increases, and that increase in resistance can generate heat. The wiring regulations have for many years outlined the need for connections to be accessible, but it was in 2008 with the release of the 17th edition that reinforced the need for electrical terminations to be accessible. The concept of maintenance-free connections was also introduced. More on that later. So what does BS 7671 actually say? Regulation 526.3 states that every connection shall be accessible for inspection, testing and maintenance except for the following: a joint designed to be buried in the ground, a compound filled or encapsulated joint, a connection between a cold tail and a heating element such as floor or ceiling heating, a joint made by welding, soldering, brazing or an appropriate compression tool, connections made within equipment by the manufacturers that are not intended to be inspected or maintained, equipment complying with BS 5733 for a maintenance-free accessory. So that part is quite clear. Connections should be accessible unless they fall into one of those exceptions. But then that brings us to the next obvious question. What exactly does accessible mean? Because surprisingly, BS 7671 doesn't give us a definition for the term accessible. Instead, the regulation works on a principle. You should be able to get access to the connection without destroying part of the building. In other words, you should be able to reach the joint box to inspect it, test it, or tighten the terminals without the need for a hammer. So if a junction box is installed under a floorboard that can be lifted, that would normally be considered accessible. But what about floorboards that are screwed down? Technically, it can still be removed, so is that still accessible? If a junction box sits above a suspended ceiling tile that can be lifted, that would also usually meet the requirement. Yeah, but what if you need a stepladder to be able to reach it? Is that still accessible? Remember installing downlights like this? Yes, but is that still accessible? Look, this is where the regulation becomes slightly vague, because technically we are still accessing the connection without damaging part of the building. And the problem is many people in the industry will interpret accessibility slightly differently. My interpretation of what is accessible is if you need a tool to be able to get to that connection, then it is not readily accessible. So a junction box under a floorboard that doesn't meet those exceptions is not readily accessible in my view. Here's another interesting example, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. A loft loft space. Many will say that it's accessible without a tool, but if you have to use that long hooky thing to open the hatch to get inside, is that not a tool? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, as well as sharing your view on that term accessibility. Now, we can put all of that ambiguity to one side because there is a better and safer solution that keeps us regulatory compliant and will help you sleep at night, and that is using maintenance-free connections. Accessories designed so the connection will remain secure for the lifetime of the installation without requiring inspection or tightening. These accessories use screwless terminal systems and specially tested enclosures designed to maintain constant contact pressure over time. They are subjected to long duration testing, vibration testing and overload testing to ensure the connection remains reliable. This is why maintenance-free connections need to be marked with the MF symbol. Traditional screw terminal junction boxes do not meet that standard because over time screw terminals may require tightening. Which brings us straight back to the brown junction box. The junction box is not the issue. The issue is the location that it's installed in. Because if a traditional junction box remains accessible, then it's perfectly compliant. But if you need to bury a connection within the fabric of the building, then the regulations are going to require that you use something different. There's another detail worth mentioning here as well, and that is many electricians assume that these junction boxes provide cable restraint. But these round junction boxes were never designed to take the mechanical strain of a cable. That job is normally achieved by how the cable is installed. Cables should be clipped, supported or fixed so that the terminals inside the joint box are not carrying mechanical stress. In other words, the joint box is there to protect the electrical connection. It is not designed to act as the primary cable anchor. So what can you do to remain compliant and, most importantly, safe? That is use maintenance-free connections like these ones from Quickwire. They are, in my honest opinion, one of the best innovations that's happened in our industry in the last few years. They are maintenance-free, super quick to use and will leave you confident in the knowledge that the joint box under the floorboards will last the same length of time as the cable connected to it. It also keeps you fully compliant with the wiring regulations. I was even able to connect 2 spurred points from one Quickwire device on a recent job I did. Wait, 2 spurs off a single point? You can't do that. Well, I did, and if you want to find out how, then click the video on screen now.